Let's get started. So awesome to be here. NDC Security, my first time, but not my first time in Oslo. Beautiful city, like the snow. It's a little cold, and I have a cold myself, so just bear with me. I'll try not to cough in to the speaker here. So I am Brennan Lodge. Talk will be Rage Against the Machine. I've already had some feedback about the talk title, so thank you. Um, and just a quick side note while folks are coming in. I feel like there's a lot of political discourse going on, these days. So tons of material for Rage Against the Machine, and of course, it's about AI and cybersecurity. But I feel like the band should make a comeback, right? I don't know, just the material and the political discourse that is going on today. But anyways, we'll rage on. So. Agenda, quite a jam-packed agenda. I got a lot of content. I've got a good amount of demos, so hope to keep you guys entertained. Um, the the content is mostly around RAG, so that's Retrieval-Augmented Generation, and of course I'll get into it. I'll introduce it. We'll do an overview, and the objective here, and this is what I like about this conference. It's a developers conference, so you guys are pretty well renowned and know how to develop, how to build things, and how to engineer things. So my goal and the takeaway is for you guys to roll your own, right? RAG. There are tons of use cases that are coming to fruition, in the cybersecurity space, in risk space, governance, risk and compliance, privacy. Quite a few, and I'll dive into it, but it's really powerful. It does have an LLM embedded, but I've been talking to a bunch of CISOs and folks in the industry, and this is kind of one of the secure foundations or frameworks to use AI. So happy to talk through. I also have an open source project that I'll get into using MITRE. And yeah, it integrates with Slack. So real quick, who is lookup on me? So I am Brennan Lodge. I've been in the financial industry about 18 or so years now. I've worked at places JPMC, JP Morgan Chase, Bloomberg, Goldman Sachs, and just last year left HSBC to build and focus and research on some of the AI stuff within cybersecurity. I'm a professor at NYU, so I teach IT management and analytics, and I get to use my students to test out some of my RAG products, which has been a lot of fun, and collecting feedback. I've been published, won a couple of awards in the AI space. Anybody familiar with Kaggle competitions? Nice, few hands. Good. I won one at Oxford 2 summers ago with ML cases, and then participated in a U.S. Cyber Command competition and won, and helped the team win that one as well. So my expertise, I got started in cybersecurity, worked in the SOC. Anybody done the grunt work of working in the SOC? Yes. So my first role, I had a 7 to 3 shift. Most of the SOCs are, follow the sun. So you get in and, very early mornings, but, it was a role that I learned a ton, right? Everything from network attacks to host attacks. And, as I've evolved in my career, I'm always thinking back to, would this help out early Brennan, junior Brennan in the SOC? To help him with his job. So that's kind of stuck with me, throughout my career. All right, so I'll go through the good, the bad, the ugly within AI. So the good, we need help. I was just mentioning working in the SOC. The SOC is 24/7. We've got a rising attack volume, a shortage in analysts or expertise. Universities are doing a better job of cybersecurity talent. Unfortunately, it's just my own little anecdote here. I wish they would teach it more in undergrad. It's more so like master's programs that you specialize. I think we need to go a bit further and have it be a dedicated undergrad degree. I mastered in data science, but we need some help, right? So is AI the savior? No. Can it help us? Yes. And I'll get into, the details there. And there's integrations that are complex. The unicorns out there of folks that know both AI and cybersecurity are few and far in between. And bridging that gap, there's a little bit of, some frustration and, butting heads on the data science community, the developer community, the cybersecurity community. And why don't we just all be happy, make a little trifecta and, come together to build out these solutions to help us. So the bad, we've got Salt Bay trying to sprinkle a little bit of AI into everything here, right? So that's not good for our community. However, it is helping with the shift, right, of shifting left. How can we be more proactive with cybersecurity defense, be more risk aware, and back to some of those undergrads that I talked about in the cybersecurity world. How can we help them level up? I think AI can be the tide that raises all boats, but we're still going to need that human expertise, the human in the loop, to help with just the human interaction behind the keyboard of analysis and good logic and understanding and research. So, on the product side, we're familiar with this, the Microsoft Copilot, Dropzone AI, Vectra, a few others in the industry that are using cybersecurity, Graphistry, for example, another plug there. And what are they doing, right? So is it vendor review, helping out with third-party risks? I think is a good use case. Threat modeling, helping us understand where the threats are. Code analysis. I feel like the products in this space, it's a bit oversaturated. And yeah, it's good for leveling up in code, but it's just not that silver bullet of finding that vulnerability. You still need that human interaction. On the security operations space, is helping with help desks, forensics, incident response, and being that extra analyst, helping out with detection engineering is always helpful. So the ugly, right? So now on the management front, as I've been speaking with CISOs, what are they complaining about? Well, how do they get their AI projects on the docket for this year for budget? Is it reducing operations efficiencies, right? Is it helping? And ROI is really tough with AI, right? So ROI being return on investment. What does that mean? How can we, gain revenue or, save a bunch of time? And it's hard to quantify. And then in the regulation space, well, can we even do it? Can we implement AI, on the business? Can we showcase it to our customers? I think we're all familiar with the stories of having AI being used by customers and some of the failures there. And what is going on with regulation? Who is leading the front? I think Europe is doing a lot better job than the Americans, quite honestly, in being at the forefront of privacy. Of course, America has the resources to build the models, but the models are being built by 30-year-old white male nerds, right? That may not have, some other text or some other content that, should be in there, that may cause, some biases, some race, gender, issues with the outcomes of the model. So there's a lot at play here. All right, so my take, AI as a guide, not necessarily a guard. You can't have this as your silver bullet, but it can be a way to guide you in the right direction on analyzing, generating text, and an ally, an assistant, if you will. This does open up some vulnerabilities, of course, but I really think we need to democratize our tools, share the data with the teams within your organization or within your own cybersecurity unit. And the speed is really a helpful tool here of rapid analysis, being able to dig into big data. Remember that term like 5 years ago, big data? Well, it's come to fruition, especially with the massive amount of logs that we have to deal with and synthesize, right? Of getting that quick alert, and having to make a decision within a certain amount of time. If you worked in the SOC, you're familiar with that timer that you have for certain alerts that you have to triage through and fight through. So hopefully this can help there. All right, deep dive into Retrieval-Augmented Generation real quick. 3 components that I've highlighted in red here: a sentence embedding model, vector database, and an LLM. There's some other nuances in the mix here, but the analogy I like to use, especially as a professor, think of a library. In a library, you have a Dewey Decimal System. Who remembers that from grade school? Nice. Of the translation, right, of numbers to the authors, to the books, the ISBN, etc. Think of that as your sentence embedding model of translating the questions into responses or lookups. So lookups now we're going to do against our vector database. Our vector database in the library analogy, you can think of how your books are organized in particular genres, right? You can use a sentence embedding model to then understand, all right, where are certain clusters of books or text that I may be looking for. And vector databases on their own, like super powerful technology with semantic search of understanding certain themes, topics, modeling, and are a really good repo to centralize your policies, your data, and I'll get into that with the use case. And then last but not least, your LLM. So that's your librarian. You go up to the librarian's desk and you ask, hey, do you have this author? Or I'm looking for a travel book for Norway. What section or where can I find that? So with those 3, we've got the sentence embedding model, the vector database, and an LLM. It's super powerful in the ability to get those accurate responses, avoid the hallucinations like Kermit the Frog here, and ensure that our answers are fact-based and verifiable. And it's verifiable on the data that you've stored in your vector database. That's your own data, right? You don't have to reach out to OpenAI that has scanned the internet, rightfully or wrongfully, for their data. But you manage your own, right? You manage your own destiny with a RAG solution, which is really powerful. And then the LLMs, I think we're familiar with this, are a snapshot in time that are built and trained on data, as of that certain date. And after that date, they become stale. So how can we integrate our data, refresh it, renew it, and still have that intelligence and contents and referable data that we know and want. All right, so now into the roll your own. I started out with a prototype. I had some benchmarks at the bottom here for my prototype, in that I wanted 10 seconds response and to keep it pretty cheap. Relatively, less than $500 within a cloud instance. Mileage is going to vary. Anything with AI and LLMs, you can host them locally, but the resources are going to be pretty intense. Within the cloud, you still get somewhat of that ability to keep your data there, secure your data in a virtual private connection, and can still do that. GPUs luckily are getting cheaper, and yeah, so hopefully being able to build and customize and roll your own will get more efficient. And the response times and the data that I wanted to use to funnel in were pretty custom. So that ability, and then just using some Python to script and get this running was a little magical. All right, so more on the details here, just a 5-step journey of how you would go about doing this. So say you have a bunch of PDFs that you want to upsert into the vector database. You're going to prepare those documents. In this case, I was able to grab some CISA advisories from email, convert them to PDF, and then strip out the text, and then upsert them into the vector database along with the MITRE attack framework, and I'll get into that use case in a bit. But keep that in mind. So we've got to split and create embeddings on the data. So just best practice that I found, I was able to split the data by page, right, and keep the same reference. So if there was a CISA advisory that was 5 pages long, it would have 5 different entries into the vector database. So now we've got that data that is split, and we've got embeddings within the vector database. And now we need some orchestration, which is where LangChain comes into the mix of being able to coordinate between the sentence embedding model, the vector database, and the LLM, and do a retrieval QA, which is the function from LangChain to do that. And now we're up and ready to ask our questions. And we do that with the LLM, and we get our response. So steps on the left, tools on the right. On the tools front, this is all open source. When I was searching for an LLM, what seemed to take the most kind of time of what specialized LLM can I use off the shelf, I decided to go with Nomic, which is an open source project that had a bunch of LLMs, and I just like their interpretability. So feel free to check them out. I have no financial obligation or anything associated with them, but they're a really cool company. And as you guys know, transparency in AI is really tough to come by, of knowing what data was used to create the models, what data is in the vector database, and Atlas, which is the data visualization tool, can help you see that. So without further ado, I'm going to show you some of the visualization tool. And this is a tool called Spotlight, similar to Nomic and all. As we just explained, of upstarting those CISA advisories, I also uploaded some MITRE attack framework, and we've got the beauty of these clusters that are stored in the vector database. So on the left here, if I click on one, the content is in the bottom left, and I also upserted some Sigma open source detections that are used to look for vulnerability or attacks in your logs, and that content and a bunch of the detections are on the left. So as I click through the clusters on the left, you'll see the detections, and now on the right you'll start seeing the CISA advisories. So it does a really good job of clustering, understanding, and putting the topics together. Excuse me. And then and I've also got some detections in the middle here. So these are some IDS alerts that fired off. So go figure, they're in between the detection and the content or advisory as to what's going on. So really powerful. Again, when you're building a RAG and folks are understanding Brennan, how does this work? What data are you using? This is really powerful visualization to help tell that story of what data you're using and how the AI model is working. So that is the visualization part. Sorry, we'll go back here. And then we'll go through stepping through the data workflow, if you will. So we talked about the data extraction using some advisories, MITRE. Now we've got the orchestration of LangChain, bringing in the sentence embedding model, and upserting that to Chroma. Now we've got everything in Chroma. We've got our LLM services in play here, and we want to interact with the LLM model. I use GPT for All, which is from Nomic, that open source. And when I was searching the Nomic models, they had a bunch of spam and cybersecurity and emails. So I found that model to work pretty well. We put this on an endpoint, like a API service, and now we can interact with it. I've got Slack interacting with it, and I've got a dedicated UI. But this is ground up, can be done. Pretty simple orchestration with some open source there. Sorry. Cool. Yeah, so now onto some of the security. We've got the vector database, or we've got the RAG platform. And what is the concern here? So, the three components, if you were to use an LLM, like OpenAI or, some API service, you can do it. But you're going out and then coming back in, you're sending your intellectual property out. You can get some of the dedicated OpenAI, tunnels that are, private, but, still some concerns there. So the better self-contained, excuse me, RAG architecture can act independently, and you can still maintain and own those environments. You can put this into a Kubernetes cluster. I've seen that, and you can still get that fast types of response. Of course, you'll have to upskill or up-level your resources with some GPUs. You can do it in a container. It can be air-gapped, and still pretty powerful. All right, so now on the users and how they would interact with the system. So we talked about the orchestration, how to put it all together, a little bit on the architecture, putting it on-prem. Now, how are your users going to interact with it? So I benchmarked it with some cybersecurity analysts around 5, and measured that. These are my students. Excuse me, and they were making about 20 queries per day. This was over a project that was able to collect some of the data, and with that, it's around 5,000 tokens per day on the utilization. Excuse me. And then with those analysts, we've got about 100,000 tokens that we're using on a daily basis, if they're consistently using that. So now that we've got that, we can do some cost. I started out with G4DN. This is the simple GPU, NVIDIA. I did try AMD for quite a bit. Hit my head on the monitor a couple times trying to orchestrate and work with it. Again, I was going for the cheaper route, but NVIDIA, it pays. I understand why their stock is so high, because they do really well with developers and integrations and drivers, and yeah, I think you guys have been through that. So I'd recommend trying NVIDIA first. And yeah, here's the cost breakdown at 500 per month. If you were to do the cost and use an OpenAI model and hit it with the same amount of tokens, an extra $100 per month, but you're still losing that privacy, some of that security, but the option is there. All right, has anybody read the Phoenix Project? Nice. Okay, so you're familiar with the book. I feel like we're at another Phoenix Project with AI. Of integration. The tech teams are trying to scramble, understand it, figure it out. I think the CISO, he was a drunk in the book and probably still is, most CISOs trying to figure out how these things are going to interact. A lot of stress, right? So hopefully I'll help navigate some of that stress, especially with RAG. And the telltale, kind of security implication or security implementations that we're used to are still at play here. So with RAG, we can put in user authentication. We can put in some guardrails. Think of it like SQL injection, right? Our prompt engineering that we're trying to protect against. The document and ingestion, right? Ensuring that the documents and the data that are going in are reliable. You can tag some of the documents and put some labels on them, or watermarks, if you will. So if you wanted to put some security controls around who can get access to what documents when you're viewing the document retrieval, you can do that. So I've seen some nifty tools to do that. And of course, we've got to secure our vector database similarly. Encryption at rest, encryption in transit with the data going back and forth. A nifty QA, so quality assurance I've tried with RAG, is HIDE. So this is hypothetical document embeddings. Essentially, you can use another LLM to test how they would respond. Again, so AI is like super subjective, especially when it comes to the content and feedback that you're trying to get out of the responses. So it's up to the human for interpretation. I think level one is just avoiding the hallucinations, right? If you can do that, then level two is prompt engineering, and that is making sure the topic is staying on the topic, right? So your analysts aren't asking why is the sky blue, even though they may want to get that. Go to Google for that. Don't go to your homegrown RAG system. You want to keep it on the topic at hand. And then output guardrails and logging are key. This is a really good architecture overview for RAG. The blue, the input output, the red, kind of the security controls, an input guardrail, an output guardrail. Storage is going to be key here, and logging as much as you can. Feedback is going to be important. And I'll get into that on like a human loop or reinforcement learning, just to help with the improvement on the ranking and your answers or responses. All right, so let's talk through use cases. All right, I have a open source project called the MITRE Embed project. Everybody familiar with MITRE? MITRE attack techniques? Nice. Okay, the majority of folks. Good. So this is a tool that uses RAG to help understand and map your detection logic, or you can create an ask about MITRE techniques. So the use case here, let's go with this one first. So convert this Splunk detection into a MITRE attack technique, and I drop in the syntax of a Splunk alert. Kind of hard, to read and can be, multi-line, multi-step. But the objective here with MITRE Embed is to auto-magically map the MITRE technique based off of the security detection that you've written. Majority of the time we're manually doing this, or sometimes when we're ingesting our detections, they have those tags in the mix. And look, just with AI and human interpretation, they can be pretty subjective. There are many MITRE techniques, but hopefully this will get you to the closest technique related to a detection. And of course, I got to tell you how to do it. So with the data collection, I collected a bunch of the open source Sigma detections, some Splunk, some custom event detection logic, and then some logs, which were helpful in the context here. I do some ETL, so that's extract, transform, and load that data, get it into a nice CSV so that I can upsert it into the vector database. We've got those detections and the log events in the same type of format or schema. And now we've got an LLM in the mix. And yeah, demo, why not? So I have to excuse me, but this is, it's in a GitHub repo, open to the World Wide Webs. This is the project. Just type in MITRE Embed in GitHub. It's through another open source community called DeepSec OSS. And all the project here, all the data is here of what I use, and the Jupyter notebooks. So this is the Jupyter notebook, and I'll run through quickly what is going on behind the scenes. So we're initiating our GPU, then we're loading our sentence embedding model, and now we're upserting some of the MITRE techniques in a CSV and uploading them to the vector database. So here's you guys see that in the back? Try to scroll in, zoom in a little bit. Yeah, so here's the count of rows based off the source of the data. So quite a bit of the Sigma detections. And here's what it's looking like going into the vector database. Some secret sauce of mine, happy to share with you guys, is the schema that I'm using in the vector database. Think of like how email um, are extracted, right? You have your subject, your body, maybe the source of the email, very similar of that schema going into the vector database. The file path is what I use for the reference when that comes back into play. So I've got all the links to the MITRE attack techniques that will get you to something like that with the response. So we'll go through this. We're going to load our sentence embedding model. We're upserting to Chroma and the vector database. We're loading some CISA advisories, which is good content on a vulnerability assessment and clustering. This is what it looks like from the embeddings, right? So a bunch of numbers, right? But it's some interesting context. And then within the vector database itself, we can search terms, right? So I'm not even integrating the LLM yet. So I ask it, give me the reference of anything related to the MOVEit vulnerability. You guys familiar with the MOVEit vulnerability? Nice. So it'll give me the top sources. In this case, it was CISA advisory that had the subject of progress software releases security advisory for MOVEit transfer vulnerability. And this is pretty good within itself. But now we're going to throw an LLM into the mix. And just for context, these are some of the scoring is the ranking of those sources based off of the content that you're searching for. So with the LLM integrated into the mix, we can now ask it questions. And in this case, I'm asking, which MITRE technique does this detection belong to? It's some PowerShell asking for security content, first seen, last seen, and maybe some upload strings within the PowerShell content. Does pretty well at identifying so this is the response that we get back, potentially C2 over PowerShell. And then I include, the query, and then also it brings back the reference. So in this case, it was command and scripting interpreter PowerShell. So it does a decent job of bringing that back. Now, of course, this is all in like JSON, so you can make this into a pretty app, or just hit this as an API service when your security detections are getting created, automation, right? I think there's a lot of use cases at play here. So that is MITRE Embed. Cool. All right, now we're going to get into it with some additional use cases, more so around cybersecurity threats. So I've got one on threat intelligence, another one on vulnerability intelligence, inventory mapping, security alert detections, and then prioritizing our alerts. So the basic premise here and the use case that I was trying to prove out was we do a pen test or vulnerability scan on our perimeter. And we've got a bunch of IP addresses of those perimeter devices. And I want to associate and understand, why should I care about certain alerts that come back from that vulnerability scan? What do they mean to me? What do they mean to that host? How should I balance it and understand it? And of course, with threat intelligence, if I get a notice or an alert of the PRC potentially attacking us from a tip-off from one of our threat intel providers, I can also get some context on that. So this is into a little bit prettier UI than a Jupyter notebook. This is the tool. It's called Caddy, a little helper assistant, not only on the golf course, but in the soccer, cybersecurity room. And yeah, I'll showcase around a bit. So the tool, I customize the system prompts. So I'm asking it to be a cybersecurity expert, referencing the data that I ingested into the vector database. So in this case, it's CISA advisories, MITRE attack, some data privacy concerns, and then the IP addresses that I included. So, just a little bit of a warning side note here. LLMs are really good at understanding like text and English and stories, but when it comes to IP addresses, not so good. Similarly with CVEs, right? There's a certain syntax, format, and it kind of throws it for a loop. And I want to create an LLM that may understand the syntax. So just a little caveat, it can be difficult, but with some good prompt engineering, you can get a little bit closer to the accuracy. And there's still some debate in the academic industry as to what is better, right? Do you just go back to the woodshed and get rid of your LLM and start a new one? Or should you focus some more time on prompt engineering? So I think it's a balance. Cost-wise, prompt engineering is less costly compared to creating and building and fine-tuning your new LLM. But I found it really powerful. So this is the prompt that you're able to customize. You can add these data sources into the vector database by simply upserting them. So we had that schema, the data source, and then we've got the PDFs. They correlate and connect with each other, so they've got to be connected. And then just some RBAC around the users when they're using it, and logs, right? So I'm big on logs, and I've had some good ideas from folks that have been using the tool, some of the students, of can we do topic modeling out of this? Or what are folks asking? What is popular? I don't want to create another word cloud that is a data visualization, but I think you get the idea on managing what types of questions, and then of course the resources that are used and transparency. Right, I think this is going to be really important with AI as to how it's used, what the time it took to get a question or response, and then first and foremost, hey, what is the cost of this response and question that I got? Cloud just quite honestly sucks with cloud costs and transparency, and it's really hard to measure and budget for. So let's do a good job with AI and try and be transparent with the token cost, which seems to be the pricing model being used. And look, I like how some companies are coming at it with using tokens and the utilization, which means you're charging by utilization. So that is, if you use this product more, you're more likely going to spend on it, right? It's a shame for a lot of the products that just come in and sit on the shelf and don't get used, right? That's not good for anybody. So I want to be able to engage with the customer, understand what their utilization is, and then build in features that will help increase that utilization for the customer, and that's good on both ends. So just a little side note there. All right, so back to the use cases you guys want to see. So the first one was on PRC. So an example being like, what's the latest threat or intelligence on the PRC or the Republic of China? This was I don't know why it's just going crazy right now. Go ahead, live demos, right? Yeah. So it provides that threat intelligence, and we can click on the link that I provided of something closely associated to the PRC, guidance, details, and a link. So think of this as you've got an alert within the SOC, you want more details on this TTP that came up that also tied to the PRC as being a potential attacker because of this alert. This can be pinged from the API, and you can bring down that document with some context. So we just covered threat intelligence. Or some other ones. Vulnerability intelligence. So give me a list of CVEs or advisories with active remote exploits. So let's see. I've got remote desktop, right? Another interesting one. Yeah, so this is a good one. The list of CVEs, these all tie back, and these are the most prevalent, not most like timely. They're from 2022, but a good list of remote exploit. And we can hit an advisory here, similar to how I did the threat intelligence. Now, if we go down to some inventory mapping, so in this case, I'm asking for which IP addresses are associated with this old Windows version, and may have POP3 or port 110 open on there. Does a pretty good job this time on that IP address. And we've got the inventory that I just stored in a PDF of those IP addresses, and some additional information about what ports may be open, and what the vulnerabilities are. So this is your vulnerability assessment, understanding, hey, what systems have this particular port or service running, and a quick explanation as to why that may be bad or may be vulnerable. Another one here, some detections. So tell me about this Sigma alert or this logic. Suspicious SQL queries using a SQL command. This is pretty good of, just give me the English understanding of why this is bad, interpret it for me, and, potentially give me the MITRE attack technique that is associated with it. And then lastly here, prioritizing. So this is really kind of like management level. Understanding of the alerts, and just out of the box, I get a pretty good response. So given that vulnerability assessment that we did, helped me rank the web attack, the SQL injection, brute force, and rank them by the severity and the urgency. In this case, the web attack or cross-site scripting was number one, possibly because we've got a lot of web presence or web servers on our perimeter, and then it goes through and gives it a brute force SQL injection, and then an understanding with some advisories and MITRE attack. All right, so we covered MITRE Embed, open source project, translating some of the detections, threats to MITRE techniques. The use cases of how RAG can help with some of the cybersecurity defense. Last but not least, and hopefully this doesn't bore you guys, I think this is an important one. Just how the hell do we understand laws and regulations? This is taken from the UN. They've done a pretty good job of collecting the world's cybersecurity laws, whether that be consumer protection, cyber crime, e-transactions. Some countries with no legislation, a lot of countries with a lot of legislation, and few and far in between. And RAG is really powerful, and I've had some folks use it to do gap analysis. And I think the research will come to fruition about how we use AI to understand what our gaps are. And this new term that I think I invented of red teaming your audit. So using AI to, before an auditor comes, How can we scramble and figure out what the gaps are and plug those gaps prior to the auditor coming in and potentially laying down some fines and smacking your hand around. And yeah, it's pretty significant. So I added in, of course, another layer of AI. Is anybody familiar with BERT models? Cool. Seeing some heads shake. So BERT does a really good job of classifying text. There's a really good white paper on, attention is all you need. Some of the foundation of BERT model there of, understanding and being like versatile and understanding the language of both, before and after as far as, sentence and text structure goes. But I use it to do classification on those gaps. So the use case being of, hey, here, I'll showcase it here. We've got, we're a big company. We've got, 90 different types of policies in our, in our repo, maybe on a Confluence page or PDFs, right? Everything ranging from end of life policy to email retention policy, third-party risk, right? Application security. You think you're doing a pretty good job when you got this, at your disposal. Maybe you're a big bank, right? And with a BERT model, you can then take that text, which I have in the body here, and then compare that as it relates to the regulation, right? So I also upsert the regulation text into the mix here. And I'll ask a client, what do you want to compare yourself against? When's your auditor coming in? Where do you feel like you have gaps? Well, Brennan, we need to follow PCI DSS, HIPAA, FERPA, GDPR, and GLBA, right? So given all of these policies, they still had some gaps in HIPAA, meaning they had nothing within those policies calling out some insurance data or private health information that may be in some HR repository. Similarly with GDPR, right? So maybe they're a US based company, but they have some customers in Europe. Hey, you probably got to step up your game and add to your policies, right? So again, this is just text comparison, right? I'm not doing the attestation. I'm not using AI to check out their controls to see if they are implementing RBAC or two-factor authentication. But this is a good first start for some of those GRC folks that have no idea where to start, right? They got an auditor come in. What regulations do I need to abide by, and do our policies map up? So having this at your disposal to first start is good to map out your gaps, and then using this RAG tool or any RAG tool can also help. Right. So, the example being, hey, what are the data privacy laws in Iceland? Right. And do they map to our policies? So now we can ask specific questions, for those GRC related audits that we may have had gaps for. And we can, get right to the section on where that gap is and what is called out in that particular Iceland data privacy law that's nuanced. So instead of having to read through the hundreds of pages, we can get to the specific one that calls out multi-factor authentication within a certain privacy law, for example. So another use case, I think it's an important one. Saving a bunch of time, identifying those gaps, identifying nuances. And this came out of just my job. So I was working at HSBC. I had an R&D team using AI, and the head of GRC asked, we're in 120 countries, Brennan, with our banks and looking to expand. Our policies are all over the place. We've got this new regulation, DORA, right? That's coming into the mix. How do we map up, right? And do it by each country, right? Pretty tall task. And RAG was, pretty powerful to do it. And, I was in New York, still am. And there was a nuanced law for New York financial companies that needed a CISO. So the question came from GRC analyst was, does the CISO need to be dedicated in the U.S. office? Can they be a fractional CISO, right? So some nuances to that regulation that weren't really called out, and the tool does a pretty good job in explaining that. So let's see. I mean, everything is about interpretation, right? Especially when it comes to law, right? And I don't mean to use this for legal matters, right? I don't recommend using this for legal matters, but it is, it is helpful, right? So we can, do that, based on NYC RR 500, which is this New York Finance. Does the CISO need to be independent? And does a pretty good explanation here, with it. The Chief Information Security Officer does not especially need to be independent. The regulation allows flexibility in the employment structure of the CISO. So, kind of game changing, right? We would need to hire a CISO. We need to structure our, bank with a CISO organization to each of the, locations that, we had. So, this interpretation is good. Also talk with a lawyer, right, when it comes to regulation. But again, a good first start. And this will take me, right to the regulatory, document. So, RAG, quite versatile in its capabilities. Hopefully these were, some good use cases for how we can do it. Slack. Of course, I'll throw another demo into the mix. I think I'm doing all right on time. You can also integrate here. So just setting up that API that I talked about, 50 slides ago or whatever, and asking it the questions. This is really powerful, especially if you have a community, a team. You can see what others are asking. This is hitting the RAG solution. So, tell me about the concerns of having RDP on a network, with a, pretty detailed response. And of course, those reference sources, on, particular scans looking for RDP, our own remote access policy. And, if this is in a channel, right, within the SOC, you can see what other folks are asking and engage. So a pretty powerful, communication tool of integrating a RAG into Slack there too. All right, so next steps. I want to pass a cybersecurity exam with RAG and see how well it does. It'll give some credibility to the tool as that assistant, as that helper for folks in the SOC. Integrating API and system integration, trying to figure out where in your pipelines this may help you. And then the real-time feeds. I want to create a sentence embedding model that understands freaking IP addresses and CVE syntax, and the feedback loop. So you saw it in Slack. So the thumbs up, thumbs down, collecting that information, logging it to help improve the service, help potentially improve the model. So those are the next steps there. And without further ado, that is my talk. So here's some links to learn more. Feel free to reach out. Look for folks in the open source community to use the MITRE Embed project or others. And then, always curious to get some feedback on RAG, how it can be used. For me, it seems like a lot of folks are concerned. I don't know if it's DORA that just came out last week, but it's making folks kind of sketched out. So this is a good tool and first step to help them out understand those regulations. And folks from startups trying to get regulated or have some credibility on, are we abiding by certain regulations so they can get new rounds of funding, seems to be popular. And then on the consulting side, I've spoke with consultants, and it's funny, you've got folks on like both ends of the spectrum of this capability. And if they were to use it within their day jobs, on one side, you've got folks that say, hey, Brennan, this is taking my job away. Like, I don't want this tool. Like, I specialize in consulting and I charge by the hour, right? So I think this is going to be a game changer of how we can charge by the delivery. And folks on the other side of the spectrum in the consulting space say this will be huge for our customers. We can charge less. We can, come in and do an audit instead of it lasting 6 weeks or 8 weeks. We can do it in 3 weeks and still be able to provide the top level service and delivery. So that's my goal, and to help understand all the freaking countries' regulations. Right. A little side note. Research project is to take that inventory from the UN and compare and contrast who's strict, who's lenient, how do these laws compare against each other, and are they right for society? I mean, that's all subjective. AI is subjective, right? But I think it'll help get the conversation going on, are we implementing the right laws? Are we just implementing annoying pop-ups, GDPR, right? For allowing cookies. Like, what is the use case and what's the understanding? And let's compare the text to see what's the best of both breeds for regulation. But without further ado, yeah, thank you. You got some time? Yeah, questions. Go ahead, Tanya. Yeah, it depends. Depends on, like, so I want to start small, right? Start with a particular use case and start with a small like data inventory. And if that's the case, pick like a low level LLM. Yeah, your accuracy might not be great, but just getting the orchestration going and line chain is good. You can check out my open source project, and I have all the code that steps you through getting RAG up and running. Sure. Yeah.
Do you know some detection mechanisms against RAG poisoning, say, when bad data gets into the RAG data set and it...
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be there, right? I explored doing like a little firewall LLM, right? That is the first line of defense on taking the input, and if it like doesn't meet a certain criteria or suspects something malicious, just exit out. The prompt engineering also helps with that, um, but it can get complex, and you can't protect against every type of attack. So yeah, there's definitely some guardrails. Good question. Any other questions? Yeah. A friend of mine suggested it to me. This was just like a summer project that I picked up, and RAG just, I don't know, kind of spoke to me, right? And I got lucky, right? Especially with all the LLMs that were coming out, and this is like 2 summers ago, right? So sometimes you just get lucky with your research and then go down the rabbit hole, and RAG it was secure. You can build it on-prem. You didn't have to, hit the internet or API services, and it was just kind of like a pet project that I've, now turned into a business. So it's cool. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, guys.